Welcome, 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 everyone. This is Breath of Life Conversations, where we discover, transcend, get raw, and have fun with every conversation and topic under the sun. And I am so excited that you're here. I am your host, Abigail. I am a professional medical intuitive and master healer. And if you don't already know, I am an avid, I am a rabid, and dare I say, very heathen reader. And I am so blessed and honored to be joined this opening of our fourth season. I cannot believe I'm even saying that, with the illustrious, magnificent word witch herself, Danielle Dulsky. And we are going to be talking about her brand new book, Honey and Bones, a Heathen Prayer Book. And it is, let me tell you guys, like chilling, like bone skin chilling. I would get like goosebumps right now because it's so good. And we're going to talk about it. Spoiler alert, there will be talk about the book because I can't stir me, guys. This is not for you. This is for me. So please go get it. Go read it and love on it as much as I do. Danielle, I'm back. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for having me, Abigail. Wow, what an introduction. I think I'm often magically either the first guest of the season or the last show. I think I've also been the last show of the season. So
I,
weird.
I love it so much. I really do. And I honestly truly believe that I like manifest this and like I need a really spectacular guest either to open this thing wide up or to close it down. And you are absolutely my favorite guest. It's just not only do I love your work, I mean, you know this, and I've told you this. I love your work so much. And I'll get to why this book in particular meant so much, but your work is goes beyond you. And I'm sure that every author probably wants that, but I've read thousands of books on this, and I'll tell you, not everybody's wish comes to fruition, but this truly, and you, all of your truly does. Like you don't. I know you create it for you, but I also know that it you do your own magic on it to make it so that when it leaves you, it can affect people how it needs to. Do you have a special like ritual, or is this just something that you like naturally intuitively do?
Well, I do have writing rituals, but I was thinking just yesterday about how this book was really written completely differently from my other books because I could write it in these small kind of bursts because there's just, these separate prayers that don't really necessarily need to and don't linearly run together. So I often was writing some of the prayers like in my car, or, I would have a download, which would normally just be me really quickly making a note on my phone to go back and maybe visit later. But with this book in the moment, I could actually write the whole thing because it's just really a paragraph. Most of them are pretty short. So a lot of it was kind of being in this unfiltered communion that was relatively instantaneous versus the way I write normally, and the way I write my longer books is to contain it and have a ritual and be like, okay, I'm sitting down and this is my experience right now, and letting it take a few hours at a time versus these short kind of snippets. So it was a different kind of ritual experience that felt really kind of in a lot of ways more pure, because I didn't have a lot of time to get in my own way if I'm just writing a paragraph. So yeah.
It really does feel like you said it's very different. from your other books. This is, guys, this is, Danielle has written 5 books that, to describe Danielle's work without becoming long-winded, um, truly has this very beautiful magical theme of wildness, and very specifically this heathen aspect, which I believe this is your very book, the first book, I guess, if we want to call it just a book, and in general, that specifically has that word in the title. Every other book has some form or fashion, either in the title itself or in the subtitle, this idea of wildness, which I think this particular creation really punches that idea up by owning the word heathen and putting it in there, and you explain it a little bit, but for us here, take us through your why, of why this idea of wildness and heathenness needs to exist in all of your books, but why was it this like owning of the heathen in for this one? What was it that was coming up for you that you were like, I have to do something?
Yeah, I know. Heathen is a very bold word, right? I did have it. It is in the subtitle of the Holy Wild, so it's like the Holy Wild, a
Right.
heathen Bible for the untamed woman. Um,
That is
but
right.
to me, those two words, wildness and heathen, they aren't very different. I know that they have different connotations, but heathen means to live on untamed ground. So, or the dweller on the heath was the one who was, the last holdout to be colonized or Christianized. And it was a derogatory term then. And then, of course, it became even more so and got applied to many different populations all over the world, the heathens. But to me now, as a modern heathen, it seems like it's all about questioning how much we want to get away with, and like, where is the boundary between belonging to the world and belonging to place, and then being just completely on the fringes and being not isolated, but not completely isolated, but just in those borderlands between, like, social acceptance and then complete um, ostracization, and being in that between place where really the witch has always lived. So, and I feel like that's important, that in between, because the witch in the old stories, she's not like completely removed from the world, or she wouldn't be in the story at all. And she's not in the middle of it either. So, she's in that place where she can sort of be aware and also not necessarily controlled by the powers that be or the overculture, and yet she is aware of it. So I like that sort of borderland place, and to me that's the heathen place. So inviting everyone to question, and I think everybody has a different answer, but everyone to question, like, who is my inner heathen. If I'm thinking about claiming the name heathen, or I feel that that word is compelling, why? And who is this part of me that is a little bit less civilized? And then what does that mean? And what am I really trying to break down for myself in terms of rules that maybe I made up for myself, or maybe were indoctrinated into me when I was a child? How do I start to strip those away and let those go? And then, importantly, after you've done that, then what now? So it's like this continual process. It's never like, I don't think heathen is like a box to check. Oh, wouldn't that be cool though?
Right? Oh my gosh. Like, talk about like if I could manifest something into the world on like a piece of paper that was like a legal form, and then be able to check I am human. That would be awesome. The thing I loved, the that when I the very first page, the very first prayer immediately thrust me into this imagery of the forest, this old wood. This to me really truly felt like it was the land. And it made complete sense to me because, as you were just explaining so beautifully, that the heathen is the person who stands on the last piece of unconquered earth and is wild and untamed and is wanting to stay that way, and to be able to literally be transported within that very first moment onto that piece wherever it exists in the world for people, but to be able to literally step onto that piece of land and then experience these prayers, the rest of them. I've read every other book that you have, and it is incredible that like you have such depth of feeling as you're reading them. But I truly felt like this was very much a book about land imagery. And like, I don't know if I would use the word helping people connect with her. I feel like this is more like you're like being like, connect with the earth and people. Like, so was that intentional, or when you finished it and you were editing and you were reading through and you were like, well, if this is what came, this is just what was, or was there like, no, I want people intentionally to be on this spot.
Was it intentional? I mean, yeah, I think it was intentional. I think that, again, thinking about the way the book was stitched together, and there's some prayers that are in it that maybe I wrote years ago. Um, and so thinking about that, even though I wasn't intending to write this Bones and Honey Heathen Prayer Book until really around this time last year, um, that there's prayers that are in it that I think I probably wrote in 2018 or even 2019, so that I've been writing this book for a long time. So I like to, more than having a strategy behind it, I like to think that I always like to think that there is a otherworldly communion that goes on when I'm writing. And so, as soon as I conceive of a book, it already has a spirit. And so, this book has maybe had its own spirit since 2018 or 2019, and maybe had more intelligence around the way the world was going to unfold over the next few years than I did, at least consciously at the time. So I like to look at it more in that way, that it wasn't so much my conscious author's strategy as it was, the spirit of this book, wanting to say what needed to be said. But, most of the things that I write have that kind of syrupy call to come
Yeah.
home to wild ground. And, I'm always holding that tension between loving what feels to me like wilds, which would be like unbuilt land, and then also living in a very built place and conscious that most people live in a built place. So holding the tension between those two, and naming that like nature is everything. Doesn't have to necessarily be that you're not standing on the concrete. You can be standing on the concrete and you're still in nature. So hoping that that comes through in the book also. But yeah.
I truly love that of all of the archetypes that exist, I would go so far as to say the witch truly is the one that holds that tension incredibly well. I don't think that there is another archetype really that comes to my mind very quickly that can say, you don't have to choose. You can be, like you said, standing on the concrete, or you can live in a home, and still be able to claim that wild heathen part of yourself and be able to enjoy it, to be able to embrace it and have it be a part of your life, and not have to be like, well, if I'm going to be that way, if I'm going to name myself witch, that must mean I must live on the ground. And, and I really truly think that another way to take your books is almost a weird survival guide for how to be to wait in the 21st century. Then you're like, okay, how do I do this? Over Danielle Dulsky, she will tell you how to do this and still be able to say, I live in a house or I live in an apartment and it's good, it's okay. Um, it was gonna ask, how if this book felt like it came faster because of how it's formatted. But as you were just saying, this has been being birthed out of you for over 5 years, 20,
Yeah,
yeah, if I'm doing my math right. So
yeah.
how did you know, instead of asking, how it was like starting and things like that, and as far as timing, but when did you know that it was done? Was it an intuitive, oh, the 13, the idea of the 13, that archetype, that numerology, you were like, yep, I know that's where that has to stop? Or was that another piece that was surprising to you as it was being birthed?
The so the concrete idea that I had in around this time last year were the 13 archetypes. So the chapters in Bones and Honey are the 13 books of, and then it's a particular archetype that I was thinking is a medicinal archetype for what you just said. I mean, I don't know that it's a, what did you say? A guidebook or like a how to a survival guide. Um, if I'm thinking about like the archetypes that I do think we need, maybe not personally to survive, but that the world really needs right now if we're going to get through this.
Really
These were
does.
the 15 archetypes that I was naming, and that they're all so different. And so, not just that these 13 archetypes are potent separately, but that we all kind of house them. I think, if we're alive today, I believe, knowing that not everybody needs to believe this, but I believe that we chose to be here. And if we chose to be here for this chapter in the world story, then we inevitably have a number of contradictions that we're housing inside of ourselves because we are microcosms of the world. And of course, we know the world is full of contradictions and dualities. And so, if these archetypes all have a certain seed inside of us, how do we amplify those right now when we are in this kind of liminal or void stage of initiation, or the global, underworld myth that we're moving through? That these would be the medicinal archetypes that we need to maybe hone or listen to or name as teacher and kind of animate within ourselves. So I started there. And then initially I think I was going to have somewhere between 30 and 40 different prayers within each book. And then it quickly was like, oh, well, that is going to be a 500,000 word book that no one will ever want to buy or read, or I wouldn't get it published either, probably. So that got pared down to 13 prayers within each of the 13 books, which of course that was the right thing all along. But that was a little bit of a journey to get to that point and realize, okay, it's going to be 13 books of 13 prayers, and some of them will be longer and some of them will be shorter. But and then how do I know it's finished? Well, I had this set idea after writing the first book, which I think is the Book of Stars. After I saw sort of the length that needed to be, in order for it to be reasonable, then I understood, the number of prayers that were going to have to go in each book, and so then I had an idea of when it would be finished. But it was a little bit of a process.
Okay. Definitely not one of those where you're like, and the birthing happens and you're like, okay, and there it is. And it was like
No,
a just complete, there is the finished product. It seems like it was way more like a puzzle where you were like, okay,
it was.
once all the pieces, and it makes sense too, because as you were saying, taking these moments from your life where you were like, oh, here's this piece of inspiration that's coming in. I'm just going to jot something down on my phone. And then having to kind of like sort through your life, I can kind of like see you just having written like a couple of words on like a sheet of paper, like a post-it note, and like eventually just like gathering them all to you, like sitting in this sea of things going like, which ones of you belong?
Yeah.
Over the last 5 years of my life, these moments, which ones are supposed to be here? But also such an interesting way to write. I think I would not call myself a writer in the way that you are. Obviously, I write, but to to hear a lot of other authors speak about how their process is in writing a book, and I know this one was very different for you in terms of your creative process, but still not having this necessarily um fully fleshed out understanding of like everything that was going to happen, just letting this book create itself in a lot of ways through these moments is the creation style that I don't know if many writers would want to tackle and take on other than if they're poets necessarily and they're writing a book of poetry, which is another way to take this if you're somebody out there who's like, well, am I going to really identify with this book? I would say if you identify with poetry, this is one of the best books of poetry I have ever read.
Oh,
And I mean, it's when Danielle says that there are these archetypes and that there are these 13 archetypes, I need you guys to understand that this covers everything. There is not a there is not a moment where you get hemmed in. You don't have to read this book linearly. You don't have to read an entire book all the way through 1 through 13. You could bibliomancy this every day for every day for a year and end up rereading a prayer and have it hit you different because these books go through the entire process from birth to death, and it really does make you consider where you are in your life and what is going on. And it makes you look at it differently and see things from a different perspective. For myself, one of the prayers that surprised me the most didn't even really feel like a prayer really as I was reading it, but it was prayer 2.3 about Persephone. And I was like, you're so sweet. I'm going, this is not like any story of Persephone I have ever read. Ever. There's always been this idea that she was stolen and that she never had any say. And here's a completely different take on it that empowers Persephone in a way that I have never seen any other writer allow her to be and gives her a voice that is entirely different. And was just the first time that I ended up seeing it because I was taking notes as I was reading it in like chronological order. But then coming to find out as I was reaching the end, I was like, she's done this. Like there are moments of this throughout, but to just use that one as a good example, this is something that you do in spades, giving women their voice there. It's incredible.
yeah.
It's
Thank you.
absolutely incredible. Do you feel like that is part of your mission as a creator, as a woman, like a soul mission to bring these forgotten or misogynized women or these ideas, these fairy tales, these um, myths and legends to give them a new voice? Or do you feel like what comes through you is actually the truth, like truly, or I guess a tape of truth?
Hmm. Yeah, I think um, when I wrote The Holy Wild, the intention was to revision the stories of these women from the Christian Bible whose stories were really sad. And because I was raised born again Christian, these stories were very much in me. And I don't think I read a book by Joseph Campbell called Pathways to Bliss until at least a
Mm.
few years after I wrote The Holy Wild. But in that book, he says, like, you can't really completely shun the stories that were put into you as a child because they're in there anyway. And when I read that, I was like, well, that's why I wrote The Holy Wild. These stories are in me anyway. So I can either, befriend them and um, find the pieces of the stories that make sense and kind of hold the tension of that question of like, why this story? Why was I, as a child, forced to color a picture in Sunday school of Jezebel getting pushed from a window, like it was some sort of like lighthearted, jolly, celebratory experience, when it was like, coloring it as a little girl this picture of a woman being murdered. Um, and so I could just, completely demonize that and say, that was horrible, that was terrible, um, how awful that that was done to me as a little girl. Or I could do that and then ask myself, well, what's the deeper reason though? And so, that was very much a part of my reason for writing The Holy Wild. With Bones and Honey, it was maybe a little bit more about these archetypes and looking for stories or myths or fairy tales that had that archetype in it, and thinking about how can I amplify that archetype a little bit in this story. So the Persephone prayer that you're talking about is a little bit different, but then these longer fairy tales like Bluebeard or the Handless Maiden that are in Bones and Honey, I didn't really
Handless Maiden
change
is one of my
those.
favorites, guys.
Which one?
Handless Maiden is like one of my favorites.
Is
It's like
so good.
rooting
Yeah.
for her.
I didn't change those very much. Like I really did have a fidelity to those stories. So in terms of the plot, for the most part, that's how those stories were collected anyway. So just trying to amplify the different archetypes a little bit, and then the words are mine, but the actual plot of the
Mm.
fairy tale is kind of the way it's been, because there's a reason why that is. Like there's a reason why fairy tales are what distinguishes a fairy tale from a folk tale is that it has magic in it. So it has magic or wonder in it already, and so the reason that it's in there is a good one already, and so you're not really having to change them very much in order to look for that archetypal medicine that's in there. It's already in there. So with Bones and Honey, it was a little bit different, but still the same. Looking for the stories that will um, hopefully bring a sense of healing or belonging to the reader, and thinking about how every story has a kind of snapshot or an image that speaks to everybody, and it's a different image for everybody, but I really believe this, like every fairy tale has a particular scene in it that you need at that time, um, given whatever you're going through in life. And you just have to find it. You just have to find that like one little bit of medicine in the story. So that's what I was after with Bones and Honey. We'll see
I
what the next.
also like I'm really excited for it. I had told Danielle via a social message that I really just need her to write a book of fairy tales, and have her like secretly be working on something in that realm. I just makes me so happy. I don't even care when it comes out. It could come out in 10 years, but I have the pleasure of knowing it's somewhere in there. It's somewhere in the shelves of your mind to like make this happen. So I am like doing all of my manifesting that like I will one day hold within my hands a book of Danielle Dulsky's versions of fairy tales, which I and because I'm a Disney girl, like I I I know that Disney does not have a like particular age bracket as far as like is it a millennial thing or is it a Gen Z thing or is it a baby boomer thing? It kind of spans over everything. But I agree with what you're talking about with that each idea of story, whether it's a, a the a magic aspect of it or just simply an aspect of that story that you need because your life is in that moment, or it allows you to see your life in the hard moment that you're going through or the sad moment that you're going through, and it helps get you through it, whatever form that magic takes. There, it's important, and it does truly, it's like music, it gets you through, and it helps you grow. And I think this prayer book is just another, it's another way. I don't want to call it another type because that's not the right, like I shy away from that word type for this. That doesn't even like make sense in my brain. But if you're a person that has not yet come to the childlike wonder that is within yourself, enough to say, yep, fairy tales, I'll go with those. This, especially too, if you are a person that is maybe either struggling with your understanding of your spirituality, um, or if you are looking to expand your idea of spirituality, picking up a book that in the title says it's a prayer book, forget, letting go your ideas of witch or heathen or woman or any of that stuff, just knowing that you need something to fill and feed your soul. This is another iteration, it's another gift that now exists out in the world for people to be able to find solace. And it reminds me of the trying to remember the book now, that which book it is, if it's five, I think it might be five, book five, that's really about that, the transition or the end period, the where we're talking really about death, and the prayers are really about when darkness is falling, or when you're in a hard time, or when somebody passes, or those moments. And it does, it truly gets you through, it gets you through. And I found myself reading those prayers and going, I wish I had this 7 years ago when I was going through a really hard moment with the loss of somebody. I found myself feeling that way as I read it, finding myself reliving moments of my life, going, I wish I had this then. But what's great is that now I have it now, and I get to go back and I get to implant this into that moment. It doesn't, in a way, it does kind of rewrite history for me. And so just another, I don't even have a question around this. I just really want to acknowledge your like genius that like whether you planned it or not, it exists in this way if people wanted to. And so they can read this for just for fun, or they can read it as an instructional guide, or they can read it as a way to help them heal. And it's so powerful.
Yeah, thank you.
Working as you do with the archetypes that you do you find that there was one part, and in this particular question, I'm thinking kind of like the maiden mother crone um archetypes in particular. Did you feel like in this particular creation mode, as you were finally kind of like piecing everything together, maybe doing your final edits, that you felt like you were in one stage or one archetype in order to create it? And I ask it because when I read Woman Most Wild, I got this like feeling of, very much this like almost like maiden mother, like kind of in that like, liminal space in between those two archetypes. It's very like empowered, like moving forward, adventurous. I mean, other books like um um the Holy Wild Grimoire, where I felt very much like you were in like the mother witch, like very strongly. I was like she is a leader in this book.
Mhm.
She wants to help us lead. There was that passion coming from your gut and your solar plexus with it,
Mhm.
and your very much righteous anger within the book. How did this one feel for you?
That's a good question. I think that since 2020, and I think it's maybe getting more and more pronounced, I have felt very like a child. I mean, just uh, like the innocent archetype that's in Bones and Honey, and um, like thinking about the chapter or the book in Bones and Honey that I was most excited to write, or the one that I wrote first or stitched together first, it was the the Book of Stars, which is built around the innocent archetype. And just having to, like, consciously, on purpose, out of necessity, see the world through as childlike eyes, at age almost 44, like being able to be like, well, I've never seen this before, and I haven't, like, the world has, my ancestors have, but I haven't seen this before. And not immediately going to, like, hide under my bed or something, because I think that it means the world is ending, and I feel that, and I understand why other people go to that place. So, but for me, as a strategy and as an Aquarian, I really have to be in this place of fierce and kind of nonsensical hope, even when the world is so dark and continues to get, um seems to be getting, more and more um, disastrous, which means to fall from the stars. So, being able to be in a place of conscious awe instead of deep fear. So I think, I wrote this book with that intention, like, in the introduction to the Book of Stars, when I'm talking about the innocent archetype, I talk about, like, the guilt of the visionaries, and how it isn't really compelling on social media to be hopeful anymore. Like, the people that are very, like, we're all going to die. this this is it. And I get that, but, like, that seems to be what draws people in, and I don't really feel that. Like, I don't really, as witch, as seer, I do think things are going to get a lot worse before they get better, but I don't see that this is, like, the end for us. And so being able to be in that place where, like, if the book is a permission slip to be nonsensically hopeful a little bit, I hope that, I do hope that readers get a little bit of that, like, if you're strangely joyful, that you get to see this chapter in the world story, even though I know that it's not a joyful chapter. I think that that's okay. Like, I keep, still, since 2020, I'll start crying, like, that I get to be here for this. It is dark, but I can't believe I get to be here for this. That, some part of me decided, like, you're going to be there for that weird thing. You're going to be there for that pandemic and that war and that part of climate collapse. And I'm like, wow, I get to see something that, at least my remembered ancestors didn't get to see. And that's interesting to me. So,
I agree with you. I do 100%. I was actually very quite literally talking about whether or not somebody was asking me whether or not I thought that the end of days was here. And I was like, no, not at all. Like, it will get worse before it gets better, but this is the process. This is the process. And we, humanity, human consciousness, our souls, there are always going to be factions of us that ascend, transcend, and understand the truth, of reaching towards unity. And we end up getting to a spot where there's enough of us that have to make a choice. Do we stay or do we stop incarnating and we go somewhere else to continue on the journey of forever? And take one step closer to unity with source or creator, whatever we want to call it, right? And but that doesn't mean that because that group of us chooses that, whatever that choice is, but the rest of it just then the darkness ensues. I mean, it does, but not in the way of like end all things end. It's now it's time for all of those that didn't reach that spot. They get to figure out in their hurtness, in their sadness, in their despair, in their trauma, do they want to stay there? Or will they learn the lessons that that group before them that did rise? Will they learn the lessons they knew? And will they rise? And so it's not, it doesn't scare me. I think I would specifically ask the question of, does it scare me that another war is happening? No, no, not really. There's like actually 13 of them. There's 14 wars happening around the world. Not one more doesn't scare me. It actually makes me quite hopeful because it just means that there's a whole other group of people that have exactly the right environment to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And if they look, and they don't even have to look very hard, they'll find these beautiful gifts like your books,
Mm-hmm.
in particular, like this one, The Bones and Honey, that will help them come
Mm-hmm.
out of wherever they are, or to give them hope, or to help them be more childlike, to help get them to that next level in their human development, their human consciousness awakening, whatever that looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings me to question about the writing process just a little bit. This idea of becoming. Um, in what was it? I wrote it down. In prayer 6-1, the old haunted skin, there's a line, shedding this too small skin. And I was curious as I read it, if as you were writing, and maybe it was just in that particular book or chapter, did you feel like you were shedding a too small skin? Like in some way you've been remade now that this creation, this new child of yours, is no longer a part of you? And if so,
Oh,
how, in what way do you feel the most change?
since birthing the book, do you mean?
Yeah,
Or
or I
in
mean,
general?
in general, I guess could be a good start, but just that idea of like it almost didn't feel like I know that the way that it's written kind of connotes, is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Denotes
Mm-hmm.
that it's almost the snake
Mm-hmm.
type of thing, shedding this old skin. But as I was reading it, it actually felt more almost like the butterfly, a complete transformation, actually. So the
Mm-hmm.
shedding of the too tight skin was almost like this old version of me no longer fits,
Yeah.
or it's not supposed to be here anymore. And I was just curious if whether it was just for this particular chapter or just in general. What was there a moment for you of that, of saying this version of me no longer needs to be here? I lay her.
Yeah, I have well, I guess I used to do it with more ferocity than I have lately, but I have used to have this idea that, every time I was at a crossroads in my life and I could choose to go this way or that way, like the big ones, not like the
Mm.
small ones, the big crossroads that felt like I will be a completely different person if I go this way versus if I go that way. That every time I made that choice, that the version of me that would have gone the other way dies. I mean, I would even have this sense of like killing her, so that I wouldn't then go back and waver and be like, well, what if I had done that, blah blah blah, because that's just so not really a part of my psyche, like going back and questioning the past and did I do the right thing. I mean, I still do it, but it's just not like a big, I feel like I can't, because I'd get stuck there. So yeah, the shedding of the too small skin, I feel like I've died and been born in my life. I mean, at least, I don't know, 13 times probably. Like if I go back and I look at my big initiations, because I do count those sometimes, I do think that there's around 13 of them at this point. And, I am only 44, and the women in my family tend to live a very long time. So, God's willing, I probably have at least another 13 more to go. And so, yeah, every time, like, I'm not the same version of Danielle Dulsky that was in her 20s or 30s, and that's fine. It does feel, I mean, it feels even more pronounced than a shedding of skin. It feels like a death and a rebirth that happens over and over again. So yeah, I do. I feel very different, not just in skin, but in um, hopes and dreams, and thinking about like what I would have wanted, what 2019 me wanted out of life versus what I want out of life now. It's all very different. And I've befriended that. We're not the same people. We're not meant to stay the same people.
The ability to embrace the change, knowing that there's something beautiful and great on the other side and more to do, I think is a lesson that so many can benefit from, for sure. For to be able to get one like great piece of wisdom, because I know that you don't even try with this, right? So I don't even say that to like preamble you in any way, but what is it that you would most want women in particular? I know that your books are for everyone, regardless of how they identify, but I just really feel like those of us that identify as women really truly need this book. You gifted us with this at just the perfect time. And I say that not because this particular time is in any way like special. I just get this feeling that whether it is now or whether it is coming, we needed this book now. We needed it in existence so that we would be able to refer to it. And so I'm curious if there is anything that has been on your heart for us to know that either comes in through this book or just has now come after it, that you really would like us all to just keep it on our hearts.
Yeah. Um, I I think that, historically fairy tales were kept primarily by women, and they were collected by men, but they were kept primarily by women. And weirdly, we want to, well, not maybe not weirdly, but we want to think that they were kept primarily by like the old grandmother or whatever. And the Brothers Grimm collected the evidence is that they collected their fairy tales primarily by younger women. And so thinking about how there is magic wrapped inside every single fairy tale, and what if it's not just a children's story? What if every fairy tale is really like its own book of shadows, and the women kind of tucked the little bit of magic that wouldn't get hunted because it was just a children's story inside a children's story, and having it seem like it's a relatively you know uh, benign thing, this little bit of magic that's in the children's story. But if you really look inside fairy tales, it's almost like the women from all of the lineages, they hid the magic in that story just for you. So in these times of feeling like we're our lineages are severed, or we don't know where we come from, and we don't know what the old ways even are, like they do, what if they are still alive in these old stories, and we just have to look for that one little bit of magic, or that little seed of magic that's been inside that children's story the whole time. So that's what I've been on fire about lately, like thinking about, these little places where the magic's been hidden. And then, beyond fairy tale, where else was the magic hidden so that it wouldn't get hunted or burned or whatever. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Danielle, you have been such a gift to me, honestly, through your work, through your, I know that you probably wouldn't consider this, but your mentorship, I look at your work, I see what you do, and it just, it's changed me, it's changed my life, and I honestly, I don't know, I'm getting teary about this. Ah, stop it. Um, it's beyond words. I just don't have them. But I hope that you feel just how important and how meaningful your stuff has been. Uh, and that I hope that I can speak for many, if not all, of your readers and fans that this is just one more link in the chain of your ineffable, incomparable work and gifts that you continue to give free-hearted and open. And I just wish that I could give you the biggest hug and just I just hope that it exudes just how much I'm so grateful. Uh, guys, this has been it's always my favorite to like come on and be able to talk to Danielle and pick her brain and get inside of all of her reasons and all of her motives for why she did what she did. I, I told you at the beginning, this was for me. So it's not too much for you didn't ask about my favorite spell, my favorite. I'm sorry, but not sorry. Um, guys, I honestly, we could talk forever about this incredible work, all of her work. Please go out. It is, by the time that this comes out, November 6th, I believe this will be, will it officially be out for like sale, or will it still be in pre-sale?
Yeah, I think just today it looks like it's really about to be out. So, yes, it will be out by November 6th, definitely.
Yay!
Yeah.
Please go out. Please buy. Look at if you're at all in wonder about this and how it has impacted all of this. There are plenty of us who have written reviews already. Please go check them out. Please buy. Please read. Please check out her other work. I will link all of the different places that you can find her work. If you are interested in working with Danielle, she has a beautiful school where she teaches you and mentors you in writing and in storytelling and witchcraft and witchery and all of the beautiful things, and is there for you whenever you need her, either in literary form or over virtual and times in person. So keep your eyes out for those beautiful gem of opportunities. Um, Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Abigail. Wow. And thank you so much for your beautiful gift too. I have it sitting, I have the black grimoire that you made. I have that sitting on the coffee table. So like, I mean, it's the most prominent thing in my living room at the moment.
You like that. I'm so glad you like that. Hey.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much again for joining us. This has been Breath of Life Conversations, and we have been joined with Danielle Dulsky. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share. Don't forget to hit that notifications button and continue to come back for other epic conversations with some of the most forward thinking trendsetters, creators, visionaries in this world, talking about topics that mean something. And I will see you next time.